Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 245, Same Old Song and Dance. The episode begins with Ash and the gang walking through a forest on the way to Blackthorn City, when Ash declared that he was hungry and hoped that there was a town coming up where they could stop to eat. And thankfully for him, Brock looked in his guidebook and confirmed that this was the case, with the town being just past the forest. Even though Ash was tired from not eating anything, he now suddenly got a huge burst of energy, determined to get to this town and get some goddamn food. So he ran to the end of the forest, with Misty and Brock following him. Unbeknownst to the three of them, Jigglypuff was smiling as it followed them as well, wanting to try and sing to them as usual. Eventually, Ash and the gang arrive in town, and Togepi seems to notice something as it runs through some bushes into a garden, spotting a girl named Brittany and her two Igglybuff, the pre-evolution of Jigglypuff. Togepi also saw the girl Brittany teaching the two Igglybuffs to dance. Brittany soon noticed Togepi, as well as Misty, closely followed by Ash and Brock, who had all come after noticing that Togepi had gone running off. Misty instantly picks up Togepi and apologizes for its interruption and any trouble it may have caused, as Brock then interrupts Misty and proceeds to flirt with the girl, who introduces herself as Brittany, although Misty pulls him away as usual, this time mad at Brock for interrupting her. Ash and the gang then notice the two Igglybuff dressed in ribbon, and Ash had never seen an Igglybuff before, so he uses Pokedex to get more information on it. As Togepi jumps out of Misty's arms to go play with the two Igglybuff, Brittany then introduces them as twins, Gigglybuff and Gigglybiff. Misty then inquired as to why the two Igglybuff had ribbons on them, leading Brittany to reveal that she was a very popular local singer, and she was known for having her Igglybuff sing and dance with her, as she had trained them to. She then brags, as humbly as possible, that she was popular enough to have her own musical variety television program called Brittany that her Igglybuff starred in, and explains that she was particularly practicing with her Igglybuff today for her first ever live concert that will be recorded for people to watch later. She then offered to show Ash and the gang a little sneak peek of her song and her dance moves for tonight's performance, as she needed extra practice for the performance anyways, so Ash and the gang gladly accepted, wanting to see her skills, and Brock was so enthused, having a massive crush on her, that he asked if he could duet with her, believing he would do a good job, but Misty just dragged him away as usual. And Brittany then started her practice performance with her Igglybuff as she turned on a CD player to cue up some music. Ash and the gang were absolutely amazed as they sat and watched and listened her awesome dancing and singing along with her Igglybuff. Ash and the gang weren't the only ones watching the performance though, as Jigglypuff had followed Ash and the gang to Brittany's garden and was also watching from high above in the sky, since it was floating. And there was also Team Rocket spying on Ash and the gang and Brittany, spying from as high as Jigglypuff up in the sky as they were in their Meowth balloon. However, Team Rocket were most interested in the two Igglybuff this time, especially Jessie, as she wanted them for her own, so that she could have her own show with Igglybuff, not Brittany, and she then daydreamed about all of the fame and fortune that she could get from having her own show. James and Meowth were somewhat freaked out by Jessie's daydreaming, but when they tried to interrupt her, this just made Jessie angry, and she declared that she wanted those goddamn Igglybuff. So James, not wanting to face Jessie's wrath, revealed that he had saw posters for the upcoming live concert in town, and he knew when it was going to occur. So with that, Team Rocket began coming up with a plan to sneak into the live concert and steal the Igglybuff. Back with Ash and the gang, when the concert practice performance ended, Ash and the gang congratulated Brittany and the Igglybuff, stating that they thought the performance would be a hit with the crowd. Just then, Jigglypuff floated down to the ground and came out of some bushes, revealing itself. After hearing Brittany sing, it wanted to sing as well, and it was about to, leading Ash to quickly go up to Jigglypuff and snatch its microphone away and stuff it in his backpack. This made the Jigglypuff extremely angry, so Brock tried to calm it down by offering it some food. Thankfully, Jigglypuff gratefully takes this food, calming it down for a while. Upon seeing Brock feed Jigglypuff, this made Brittany hungry, so she invited Ash and the gang for some lunch, also inviting Jigglypuff as well, as she was curious about its behavior and how it wanted to sing completely independently, and she also invited Jigglypuff to the concert, suggesting that Jigglypuff may enjoy it because she likes singing so much. Jigglypuff happily tagged along with Ash and the gang and Brittany as they went to go have some lunch, thinking that it may get to sing as well. However, when Ash and the gang only hyped up Brittany and the Igglybuff, stating how they were going to be stars and super popular after this performance, Jigglypuff realized that it wasn't going to be involved in the concert and proceeded to take revenge on the Igglybuff, being jealous of them. However, it was extra careful to only take out its anger on the Jigglypuff when Ash and the gang and Brittany weren't looking, so it wouldn't ruin its reputation, even though its reputation, I would say, has already been ruined by this point. But anyways, when Ash and the gang weren't looking, Jigglypuff went ham on the Igglybuff, stomping on their ribbons and kicking them all over the place, even ripping off their ribbons, and of course bullying them verbally as well by sarcastically complimenting them with the same compliments that Ash and the gang had given them. When Misty turned her attention to the Igglybuff and Jigglypuff, before Jigglypuff removed their ribbons and simply was just kicking them, all it had to do was quit kicking them and look all innocent as soon as Misty looked over, and then Misty would eventually return to the conversation with Brock, Ash, and Brittany. However, once Misty noticed that the two Igglybuff had lost their ribbons, being alerted by the two Igglybuff crying because of this, Misty accused Jigglypuff of doing something, believing it to be the only possible culprit, but Jigglypuff motioned that the wind simply blew very strong and blew the ribbons off of them, and proceeded to kindly, quote-unquote, place the ribbons back on them, trying to prove to Misty that it didn't do anything bad to them. To further convince Misty that Jigglypuff was nice as pie, Jigglypuff then happily nudges Misty's leg. Brittany then goes into her house to get some tickets for Ash and the gang, stating that they would be free. Ash and Misty were happy at this, with Misty taking the opportunity to remind Jigglypuff that it was invited as well, deserving it after helping out the Igglybuff after the wind had apparently blown away their ribbons. Ash and the gang then went into Brittany's house to go get their tickets, giving Jigglypuff another opportunity to bully the two Igglybuffs, knocking them to the ground by kicking them. Once Ash and the gang had tickets, they then went to the concert hall with Brittany, and there was a bit of time before the actual concert, so Ash and the gang talked to her backstage, wishing her good luck, and stating that they'd be rooting for her. Ash and the gang also compliment Brittany's new dress and Igglybuff's new ribbons and headbands that they had on. Brock was so enamored by Brittany's new dress that he couldn't help himself with all the simping he was doing. And this makes Jigglypuff jealous, so when no one was looking, Jigglypuff gives the two Igglybuff one last kick as it kicks them off the table. The Igglybuff knew that they had to shrug this off as they had to go out to perform, as the Igglybuff followed Ash and the gang and Brittany out of the backstage waiting room. Ash and the gang took their seat in the crowd as it was going wild as Brittany came out, and Jigglypuff was beside Ash and Brock and Misty as well. When the live performance started and Brittany began singing, along with her Igglybuff, which were also dancing, Jigglypuff wanted to sing as well, obviously, and got immensely sad when it realized that it didn't have its microphone on it, but it soon remembered that Ash had put the microphone in his backpack. So it hops out of its seat and goes back to the backstage room, remembering that Ash and the gang had left their backpacks there. Sure enough, she manages to find Ash, Brock, and Misty's bags, but she didn't remember which bag exactly was Ash's, so it goes through them all, going through Misty's first, as it jumps on the table with the backpacks, and unfortunately for Jigglypuff, it finds nothing, so then it goes into Brock's bag, and finds some food, being a bread roll, and eats it, but was still somewhat disappointed, as the microphone wasn't in there either. So it came to the conclusion that Ash's bag had to have been the one that it hadn't checked, and sure enough, it finds its microphone. Back in the crowd, Ash and the gang realized that Jigglypuff had disappeared from the crowd, but they soon saw Jigglypuff appear as soon as Brittany had finished her performance of singing, which Jigglypuff saw as the perfect opportunity to sing on its own. Ash and the gang were obviously surprised to see Jigglypuff up on the stage, and were worried that he was going to sing and put everyone to sleep. But I guess, thankfully, before Jigglypuff could sing the first note, Team Rocket then showed up in disguises. Jigglypuff wasn't just stopped from singing because Team Rocket started singing, stating their motto, but it was also stopped from singing as Team Rocket's sudden arrival had caused the stage to shake, as they had literally rushed onto the stage, and were also dancing around rapidly while doing their motto, as they took off their disguises and revealed themselves as Team Rocket. This didn't even matter though, as the crowd was already booing them the second they came on stage, as they thought that Team Rocket's dancing sucked ass and their motto was boring as fuck. Yeah, you thought their motto was boring now? Imagine having to listen to it for 245 episodes. Also, by the time Team Rocket revealed themselves, Ash and the gang had arrived on stage to confront them. Even though Team Rocket were there for the Igglybuff, they didn't want their performance to be tarnished, even though all of the audience hated them, so James tried to dispose of Ash and the gang by sending out his Victory Bell to attack. However, Victory Bell of course ate James first, allowing Ash to send out his Phanpy. Victory Bell started off by using Razor Leaf, but Phanpy was able to dodge and then take out Victory Bell using Takedown. Jessie and Misty then got involved, as Jessie sent out Wobbuffet and Misty sent out her Poliwhirl. Jigglypuff still wanted to prove to Misty that it was a helpful little fella, and therefore stopped Poliwhirl from attacking, as it went to go attack Wobbuffet instead, using a double slap, but Wobbuffet simply used counter to reflect the double slap back at Jigglypuff, knocking it back down onto the ground. Poliwhirl then finally steps in using Water Gun, and Phanpy uses Tackle, but both of these attacks get countered by Wobbuffet, just as Jigglypuff's double slap was. James then sent out his Weezing, and had to use Smokescreen to cover the entire stage and blind Ash and the gang, as well as Brittany. Team Rocket used this distraction to their advantage, as they then stole Brittany's two Igglybuff and made their escape, and when the smoke cleared, Brittany was instantly saddened as she declared that her two Igglybuff had been stolen. Ash and the gang and Brittany were so caught up by this that they didn't even realize that Team Rocket had accidentally stolen Jigglypuff as well. Ash and the gang tell Brittany that they would do everything in their power to find the Igglybuff, with Brittany stating that she would come along as well. Although she admitted that she was concerned about her audience, as they seemed pretty angry at the fact that there was no performance going on, and there was no way that she could stay behind and perform, since she didn't have her Igglybuffs. Ash simply goes to the audience and tells them that there was going to be a little break while the Igglybuff were located, explaining that they were lost. But just as Brittany suspected, this infuriated the crowd, as they paid money for tickets and they wanted to get a good show. Ash tries to reason with them, stating that Brittany couldn't do the proper show without her Igglybuff anyways, but the audience didn't care about this, leading Ash and the gang and Brittany to realize that something had to be done to keep the crowd entertained. Ash and Misty asked Brock to be the thing that kept the crowd entertained, believing that he must have had something he could do to entertain. Brock initially refused, not wanting to go out on stage because he wanted to be with Brittany, but when Brittany personally requested him to do something, Brock instantly changed his tune, believing that that would improve his chances with her, and confidently stated that he did in fact have an act ready to perform in dire situations like this. So with that, Ash, Misty, and Brittany went off to go find the two Igglybuff, while Brock, at the concert area, went up on stage and sung his song Brock's Paradise, which he claimed was extremely famous. Even though it wasn't, the crowd loved this shit. Meanwhile, as Ash, Misty, and Brittany went out to the forest to go look for Igglybuff, Ash got the idea to send out his Noctowl to go scouting for Igglybuff or Team Rocket. Speaking of Team Rocket, they had landed their Meowth balloon somewhere in the forest. and were now eagerly discussing their captures that they were very hyped about, being the two Igglybuff, debating what they were going to do with them. James suggested that they make a cartoon and several movie specials based on Igglybuff, and also make toys out of them and merchandise from the shows so they could sell them and make even more money. But Jessie, on the other hand, disagreed, stating that the two Igglybuff would instead be not the main stars, but supporting actors in her own show. As she daydreamed about being on a poster that advertised her new show where her and the Igglybuff battled against Ash and the gang, she declared that this show would give her fame that would act like a snowball. It would go down a slope and get bigger and better as time went on. She excitedly goes to the Igglybuff, which they had captured inside of a bag, to inform them that it was time to get filming for the show. However, when she untied the bag, she not only found the two Igglybuff, but also Jigglypuff, who looked extremely angry due to being captured. Team Rocket saw this and didn't want to risk Jigglypuff doing anything to them, so they stopped for a moment and debated what to do. Eventually, they tied it to a tree after throwing it out of the bag, and taped its mouth over so that it couldn't do any singing. And they then abandon Jigglypuff and take the Igglybuff with them as they fly off to a new location in their Meowth balloon. Jigglypuff wasn't left alone for long though, as although Noctowl was ordered to find Igglybuff or Team Rocket, it had instead located Jigglypuff and immediately reported back to Ash and the gang and led them to it. Upon seeing Jigglypuff tied up, Ash comes to the conclusion that it must have been Team Rocket's doing, but noted that he didn't see Team Rocket or Igglybuff. He then untied Jigglypuff and decided to ask it where Team Rocket and the Igglybuff had went, assuming that it would know, since it was just tied up. It seemed Jigglypuff did know, as it agreed to lead Ash, Misty, and Brittany to Team Rocket, wherever they had went off to. Why did Jigglypuff agree to help them, you may ask? Well, it simply hated Team Rocket more than it hated Ash, Misty, and Brittany, because Team Rocket fucking tied it up, and it obviously had a bone to pick with them now. Anyways, as Jigglypuff gladly led Ash and the gang to Team Rocket, wanting to get revenge on Team Rocket, Brock was now not so in the crowd's favor, as he was struggling to come up with another song to sing, because his only song was over very quickly. Anyways, as Ash and the gang continued to follow Jigglypuff, it began to puff itself up and go in the air a little bit, trying to explain to Ash and the gang that Team Rocket had flew away in the Meowth balloon and were now likely in the air. Being able to understand this, Ash then had his Noctowl do another aerial search, and he soon found Team Rocket's Meowth balloon, as well as the two Igglybuff inside, who were pissed as fuck at being captured. Also being pissed off when Jessie had informed the Igglybuff of what she was going to do to them. Jessie was then cut off though, as Noctowl wasted no time using Peck on the Meowth balloon to send it crashing down, and once it did this, it flew down to the crash site as Ash and the gang also ran there, cornering Team Rocket, getting there so fast that Team Rocket had no time at all to recover from the crash. While Ash, Misty, and Brittany currently had the advantage, Brock definitely didn't, as not only had he run out of new songs to sing, but he was having trouble with singing the song, getting tired of it, making the audience even more angry. With Team Rocket down, and having previously let the two Igglybuff out of the bag, this allowed the Igglybuff to go up to Brittany, but before they could happily jump into Brittany's arms, as she requested, Jessie managed to get up out of pure anger, not wanting the Igglybuff to be taken away from her, as that would ruin her chances of her career taking off as a star. So she sent out her Arbok, and had it quickly slither up and scoop up the Igglybuff and bring them back to her. In order to reclaim the Igglybuff, Misty sent out her Corsola, and Ash sent out his Totodile, and James decided to help Jessie by sending out his Victreebel, though of course Victreebel ate James first. The battle then turned from one big four-way to two 2v2s, being Totodile versus Victreebel and Corsola versus Arbok. Victreebel attacked Totodile with a Vine Whip, but Totodile was able to dodge and use Scratch on it, and Arbok managed to headbutt Corsola, but Corsola countered by tackling Arbok, which knocked it into Jessie, causing Jessie to drop the bag, which she had just put Igglybuff back into, which frees them from it. Before the two Igglybuff could run over to Brittany though, Meowth stops them by simply standing in their way. However, Corsola then goes to tackle Meowth, knocking him to the ground, allowing the Igglybuff to do what they wanted, return to Brittany. However, as soon as they do, Brittany orders her two Igglybuff to take revenge on Arbok and Victreebel for trying to stop them, and tells them to use Charm. Ash and Misty didn't think the Igglybuff would be strong enough, so they wanted to help, but Brittany stated that she knew her Igglybuff had got this. And sure enough, the Igglybuff were able to charm Victreebel and Arbok, and also follows up with a Sweet Kiss, and with Charm and Sweet Kiss combined, this stalled Arbok and Victreebel, allowing the two Igglybuff to do little mini slaps towards them. Jigglypuff spotted this, because of course Jigglypuff was there too, and proceeded to show the two Igglybuff how it was done, as it did a true double slap, knocking Victreebel and Arbok straight into Jessie and James. With Victreebel and Arbok down, Pikachu took the opportunity to use Thunderbolt on Team Rocket, though surprisingly this didn't quite send them blasting off, though Totodile was quickly able to, using a water gun, sending them blasting off high into the air. With Team Rocket gone, the two Igglybuff happily jump into Brittany's arms, as Ash, Misty, Brittany, and the two Igglybuff head back to the concert hall, where Brock was exhausted by too much singing and all of the constant booing he was receiving. Thankfully for Brock, when Brittany and her two Igglybuff come on stage, the crowd instantly stops booing and erupts into cheers. Brock knew that it was only for Brittany and the Igglybuff, but he didn't care, as he happily allowed Brittany to take over, and went backstage, not wanting to face the crowd ever again. As Brittany and her Igglybuff began performing the song that she sang to Ash and the gang, and Igglybuff danced along to in the beginning of the episode, Brock eventually returned to the crowd itself with Ash and Misty, as the crowd, Ash, Misty, and Brock all cheered on Brittany, singing along with Brittany as she performed. Once the performance was over, Brittany revealed that that was her last song and began walking off the stage. However, before Brittany and her two Igglybuff could make their exit from the stage, Jigglypuff walked on the stage, believing that it was now its turn since Brittany was done, as it began to sing, putting everyone to sleep, including Brittany and her two Igglybuff. As a result, Jigglypuff got angry as fuck, as usual, and scribbled on everyone's faces, leaving the crowd, Ash, Misty, Brock, Brittany, and her two Igglybuff with scribble marks, still sleeping, as the episode came to a close, as Jigglypuff left.